And I would also want to welcome everybody to this special Psych Creative session. Not only are we kickstarting a new season of Psych Creative after we were off for the summer, but tonight we're joined by a very special guest, as you know, the wonderful Bea Gonzalez, novelist, educator, and founder of SophiaCycles. Bea is the author of The Bitter Taste of Time, the Mapmaker's Opera, and most recently, Invocation. Her work has been published internationally and even adapted into a musical at the New York Musical Theater Festival. And what makes Bea's voice so special is how she brings together fiction, myth, and Jungian depth psychology. She has a beautiful way of showing us how story isn't just for entertainment, but it's also a way of listening to the unconscious. It's a way of meeting what lies beneath the surface in our lives. So in this evening's conversation, um, the conversation itself will invite us to explore how, when writing fiction, characters, images, and plots can surface what is unresolved in us, and how story itself can act as a mirror, a guide, and sometimes even a ritual. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and my lovely co-pilot here, Sarah. Um, Sarah's right there. We are both looking forward to it, so let us all dive in and please join us in giving a warm welcome to Bea. So, Bea, we're very happy to have you with us today.
Thanks,
And
Zula.
I would like to start with the first question. So, what first drew you into the idea of fiction as a way of listening to the unconscious? Did that start as you were writing fiction? Is it something that hit you, or did you know it all along and hence start writing fiction? So, what came first?
Okay, so I have to go back to my days in London, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Lula, by the way, because it was in London, weirdly enough, I was doing my master's in a program that was great at King's College, University of London, in both literature and history. In my case, I was working on the Romantics, and as it turned out, I was living in this great international students' residence. And by the way, people, if I start speeding up, which is my habitual mode, you're allowed to say slow down because I do have a problem with speed. Anyway, at this international students' residence, I became very good friends with an American student who was at the Courtauld Institute doing a master's in the history of art. But he was also a musician. He had played in the Harvard Orchestra and loved opera as much as I did. I was in my 20s at this time. And we used to listen, like in those days, compact discs, right? We used to listen. He had a great collection he had brought from the United States. And we would listen to these operas. And I quickly became very interested in the work of one Richard Wagner. Some of you may know him. And I had to encounter the uncomfortable problem, which is that if you like Wagner's work, you have to deal with his life, which he was a terrible human being, as many of you might know. But his work is deeply archetypal, and his work changed opera, changed music, really. And so I came back to Toronto, and it turned out that one of the people who'd written, I think, most profoundly about, most interestingly about Wagner was a classics professor who was sitting at the University of Toronto, and his name was Father Owen Lee, and he used to do like the sort of halftime. It's not a halftime. What are they called? The intermission talks for the Met, and I would hear them on the CBC here in Canada. And he wrote a very interesting, various books. He was also, I love the classics, by the way. I absolutely love Greek dramas. So the fact that he could bring these two things together was really important to me. And it actually was a gateway drug to Jung. Okay. So he wrote several books, but one of them in particular was called Wagner, The Terrible Man and His Truthful Art. And his approach was one of that artists often are trying to resolve things through their art that cannot be resolved in life. And that just seemed so powerful to me as a thought. And it also allowed me to take on the thorny issue of so many artists who are so problematic, and many of them are, as we know, right? But more importantly, for me anyway, it took me to how powerful the unconscious is and how it can be a gateway into understanding not only yourself, but if you, some works of art connect the whole world together, it stitches it together. So that was my original interest. And all throughout whether it was in academia and then writing or SophiaCycles, I've been trying to follow how different works of art are revealing ourselves to ourselves and how that's changing across time. So you can hop from, let's say, the Gothic, the Castle of Otranto, an 18th century novel, and then you hit the Wuthering Heights, which is kind of Gothic, and then you hit Dracula. All of these things are showing a development in some levels of how the unconsciousness is coming online, if it makes sense. Karen LaGrice mentioned that the word unconscious comes into a textbook in the mid-19th century, I think about 1846 or so. I can't remember the exact year. And I'm just thinking that it's the time that Dostoevsky is writing his novels, which are incredibly illuminative about the unconscious. It's about the time Wagner is writing, his major works. And so that was kind of the way, I'm sorry if it's such a long, complicated answer, but that's the way I became really interested in how we could do it. Now, little did I know at that point that my own writing would actually start revealing itself to me, but many years later, because it took a long time for me to understand. And recently, and one of the members, at least, of my group is sitting here, I've been boring them to death on the WhatsApp chat I have with these series of dreams that are happening to me or are coming, which seem to be related to the new book I'm incubating. And that's where it really hit me. Everything came together, that there is something going on in the unconscious that is, yes, it's trying to reveal it to to yourself, and that fiction in particular, for me, because I don't know how to paint, I don't know how to do a lawyer, I'm certainly not a composer, is a fantastic way in. Not because you're necessarily trying to publish anything, but because in the creation of stories, something is coming out. And I would actually argue that many writers have a theme that I call the unresolved chord, and we can explore that in a minute, that keeps showing up. And that's what showed up for me. So I'm sorry, a very long-winded answer, but that's the best way I can put it together.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you, Bea. And in speaking about the parts, the deep parts within the self that you're not in touch with, and in Jungian terms, would you say that fiction allows us to meet the shadow or even enter into a dialogue with the archetypes within? Well, has that been your experience? Is it
Yeah,
a
it
form of
has.
shadow?
Yep, it is. It is. But I have to say, it took me a while to figure out what was going on. I don't know if anybody else here. I'm sure there are a lot of writers here because I'm assuming that a lot of people in your group would be writers and artists. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. And I think the reason it took me a while is I didn't really want to admit what was going on. So let me start with something I'm going to propose to all of you. I have often taught people in my group about something called the Tristan chord. The most groundbreaking work in opera is Tristan and Isolde. I'm going to be actually teaching a course on romantic love and Tristan and Isolde for the JungArchademy in February. And I've been really diving deeply into this one myth, right? And the reason Tristan and Isolde is such a groundbreaking work is what Wagner did there is like break every rule there is. And by breaking every rule, he comes up to a great truth. What does he do? He takes one of the biggest love stories, right, that you have, and he says, how do I recreate in music what that love feels like? This unrealized longing, right? Longing is a very important word here. And he figures out the way to do it is to create a chord. In music, usually a chord goes and it resolves, it rises, it goes, if you're hearing something. He creates something where that chord is unresolved for 5 hours. So you keep being brought up like, you keep going up, but it doesn't quite resolve. It only resolves once Tristan is dead and Isolde sings what's called the love death song. It's so dramatic and grand. And then this incredible piece of music comes out, which resolves this chord that has been in the background, changing, evolving, but never quite resolving into anything. And the reason that struck me, and it's a very powerful opera, so much has been written about it, because after that, he kind of broke the mold, and opera had a bit of a problem trying to get back on track. But then I thought, how does that apply in our lives? And I came up with the notion that the unresolved chord is something we all have within and that we're trying to resolve. There's something, I'm sure you all have felt this, where you keep bumping against the world and you go to Jungian analysis and you do group dream analysis and you read and you do everything and you meditate and you go to, Sufi retreats like I did, and somehow it just doesn't resolve. And then it occurred to me that maybe that's the reason you're here. This is an esoteric kind of reading of maybe you're here to try to resolve it with the realization that you may never quite get there. And once you kind of surrender to that idea, it's a very interesting concept, because then people and situations that enter in your life are just, they're learning that goes along the way. And so I started looking at people's work in that way, right? Authors I really liked. And then, I had to turn the lens on me. And I thought, okay, what is constantly showing up in my own fiction? And I realized I'm really split. I'm sure a lot of us are. And what kept showing up was beyond the shadow. A feminine masculine split kept showing up here. And the way it was materializing, I didn't realize it until what happened was my first novel was called The Bitter Taste of Time, and it was my most Spanish novel. I'm born in Spain. I emigrated to Canada young, but then I kept going back to Spain. So I kind of had this weird upbringing where I had one foot in one place and one foot in the other. So I simplistically thought that the problem was that I had published this novel pretty early on. It was published in other countries. It got some attention, but I was really uncomfortable after it came out. And at the time that it came out, I started Jungian analysis. And my Jungian analyst read it and said to me, wow, your feeling side really comes out here. And I shut down. I thought this was terrible because my association with really good authors is that, and this is my disowning of the feminine, if you see where I'm going, was, oh, you can't be emotional because if you're emotional, you're not taken seriously because, good works are not emotional works. And I realized that my problem was when I write fiction, I'm thinking in Spanish, but writing in English, if that makes any sense to any bilingual people here. And I'm sure it probably does to a lot of you. It's really hard. Yeah, okay, so I see the thumbs up. That's the way I see it. And I thought it was a language problem. So at the beginning, I very rationally said, oh, this is a problem with two cultures. I can't really inhabit either one, so I'm trying to resolve it. But then as I delve deeper, I understood this has nothing to do with culture. It's representing itself that way. It's my discomfort with the feminine side of myself, which is the more emotional, more relational. So the first book is basically about the lives of 6 women across 80 years in Spain, Spanish history, and their relationship to each other and all the men that keep messing up their lives, basically, okay? And so the second novel, I reined that in. I said, that's not happening. So the way I hid the second novel, and it's funny now looking back on it and with some kind of like clarity and thinking, I can't believe I was doing this. I created a novel based like an opera. That's the one that was turned to musical. I thought, okay, I'm going to hide behind the structure of an opera because operas can be emotional, but then they're not going to be, they're not going to be looked as too, I don't even know what the word is. So anyway, that's what I did. And I hid in there and I wrote that. And then after that novel, I had kind of like a classic midlife dip. I thought, this isn't it. Whatever's happening here is not making me feel comfortable. And I met with my editor and I told her, well, I don't know if I'm going to write this kind of novel. And she said, well, this is how we're kind of developing you, how it works in publishing. And I basically bailed out. I went for the next period. I founded SophiaCycles. I started going, I even stopped reading novels. I now look at this and I think, oh my God, what was going on in my mind that I couldn't even deal? Stopped reading novels and just went directly into the collected works of Carl Jung plus the millions of other books that I just immersed myself, all nonfiction. I couldn't even read fiction. I should have been a tell, but it wasn't a tell. I just kept justifying it. I need meaning, I need depth, and the Jungian world kind of adds that, right? So anyway, so long and the short of it is that for many years I just did that. I built the SophiaCycles project, which is fantastic, and the group I've gathered has been fabulous. But then one day, about 2 years ago, I was watching Pride and Prejudice, and I thought, the thought came to me, like, how would two people today what kind of conflict would they have? And I thought, well, the conflict would be of ideas, right? Because this is what we're seeing everywhere. And of course, it would involve social media because that's what we're also seeing. So the idea for Invocation came. And at the beginning, I said, I'm not going to write this. This is completely silly. There's no way. It was my group who said, no. I had kind of said, oh, by the way, this idea is in my head. And anyway, long and the short of it is that they convinced me, and in 22 days I just wrote this novel. It just came out of me like, well, whatever, and it was really written for my group. But after writing that, I thought, here's the essential problem that just revealed itself, because in the novel it's two characters who get into a debate that goes viral, and one is a professor of literature with a Jungian bent, and the other one is a cognitive scientist with very much left brain in the McGilchrist sense of focusing on, the details, etc. sense. And they have to come together, and I wanted him to understand her worldview more, because I think I was trying to understand there's a conflict within me as to these two sides, as to who's going to triumph. Whenever I go too much on the Jungian side, I kind of go in the archetypal world, I think, rein it in, and I have the Alberto come in to say, no, that's too much. And so it was really a dialogue between the two sides. And after I wrote that, I felt kind of, and this is why I'd really recommend people come up with stories, even if they're not planning to publish. I kind of felt like I was knit together, if that makes sense. Like I'd come together by writing that novel. And that is an amazing feeling. I never felt that in analysis. I never felt that anywhere. And so that's what gave me the clue personally that this is well worth doing, well worth embarking upon, even if you have no intention of publishing anything. And most recently, with my new novel, which is going completely in a different direction because it's easy to get bored, I cannot believe that my dreams will only come to me now if I consciously work out in my head the voice, the narrative voice, the split again, right? Is it going to be intellectual or is it going to be more emotional? I know that sounds like such a silly thing, by the way, I know, but to me it's a deep problem. And I only get a dream if I'm actually working out that voice before, and then I get a response in my dreams. And it's been happening for about a year, and it's comical and also fascinating. So I almost make it a point to think about it before I go to sleep so I can get a dream. Otherwise, I won't remember. And I think it's because that's where I'm split. But in my normal life, I'm not really having a lot of angst right now, right? So I think the psyche is always trying to balance itself. And if something isn't being worked out in the outer world, like everything's kind of calm at this moment, then I'm going to create the waves which are there, which are, around this whole split issue I have. So again, a long answer, sorry.
I love that. I love the way you described it, and the experience is just so spot on. And you reminded us, of course, that Jung said symbols arise when we're grappling with something beyond rational understanding. So you just mentioned left brain, right brain, and one Jungian analyst here, and then another cognitive scientist there. Um, and from your experience in writing, how do you see your fictional characters, plots, or images working as symbols of unresolved inner material?
Well, I would say that interestingly enough, in every one of my stories is a relationship that goes badly
Um,
at some point. Either they're all bad or, somebody terrible. When I wrote
yeah.
Invocation, that was not the only time that I thought this isn't about that. And by the way, I did have this comical period where I thought, well, I really should kill one of them off. And then I thought, no, that's an actual rational statement you're trying to make to yourself. And one thing I've learned, and I think all of you probably, I'm sure a lot of you artists or, in various mediums, I think when you try to introduce a rational kind of thought into it, for me, I'd lose the whole story. It just doesn't work anymore. So I thought, no, you're trying to manipulate it so you can feel safe. And if you feel safe,
Hmm.
this isn't going to work. Even though, of course, it was less dramatic. But I thought, no, this is important. So for me, and I don't know how everybody else does it, it'd be interested to know. And Rula, you're a poet. Maybe you can tell me how you do this. For me, things download. I can't, and I'm sure it's the same for all of you. They download, and I have a structure because I think the one thing that a creative writer can do is you have to have structure, right? But then whatever
Yeah.
else comes through, I just let it come through, and I'm sure like for everybody else, I'll be doing something completely different, and then a scene will show up, and I'll think, oh, that's interesting, right? And instead of dismissing it as a fantasy because it's already part of the structure, I've already thought about sort of the general milieu that I want to create. I really engage with it. I go, but I don't interrupt. I watch a download, and I think it was Susan Rowland who said about the Red Book that it is like a novel. It is a novel. It's basically it. It may be not structured in the way that, but for me, when I read the Red Book, I think this is completely the whole process I see. Right?
Hmm.
I think the only thing a novelist might do is again create a little bit more narrative structure, massage it a bit more. But that's what I do. I just let it come in, and then I think, well, I try not to overanalyze while I'm writing. I just try to see what happens, and then after. And it's funny that I had to go 20 years later, look back at my early novels and go, wait, what was going on here? It wasn't what I thought it was. But that's how the process works. And then I'm able to see, okay, well, that's how I was able to locate that the biggest unresolved chord in my own life is having to integrate the masculine and the feminine. By the way, I think that's a big problem for everybody. Jung definitely says that, right? But for me, it's so front and center. What's great about writing, and I think great about doing any of this, is you don't generally meet it as much in the outer world when you're meeting it in the inner world, and if you're engaging with it. So it's almost like it's not like a spiritual bypass in the John Wellwood, but you are actually able to work with this, and it doesn't mean you're not going to meet it out in the outer world because you will, but it's a way that you can process it and for me anyway, in a deeper way, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I like that. And in a way, you make it seem as if it's the performance of the unconscious images on the page the construct here is the novel format. That's the home, that's the case for everything. Sort of like reminds me of Ursula Le Guin's carry your bag theory of fiction. And this is really interesting because how do you recognize the difference between a constructed plot and one that emerges organically from the unconscious? And do you ever
Mm.
stick to a constructed plot? In my case, in poetry, I never do. I start off somewhere, but then I let it take me. Same thing about following a recipe. So cooking is also the same for me. I never follow a recipe with all the details. And I was wondering, is novel writing the same thing?
Well, it's so funny because I never follow a recipe either. I'm known to just throw things in and hope it all works out. But then I'm very impatient, so it kind of makes sense. Actually, Rula, I think it's the same thing. For me, it is anyway, because I'll tell you, I had an interesting experience with my second novel, Mapmaker's Opera, in that my publisher bought it outright, and then I produced the first version, which was heavily the second part of the novel, which was set in Mexico, was really heavily like I had it was too much of a rational interventionist kind of attitude when I was writing it. Did not work. But she said, "Oh yeah, just well, you'll work on it later." And then one day, sitting in my basement, I remember my kids were really young, holding on to one of my children, and I thought, "Oh my God, that's." I had a total download of what the second part should be about. And I actually took, she'd already bought this novel. It would have gone ahead. I took it and I rewrote it in its entirety because I knew that was the way to go. And what I recognized at that moment is that the reason the first time had not worked was because I had consciously tried to create something, that just did not feel right. And maybe this is where the feeling function goes in. I almost have to go by what, and Rula, maybe with poetry, this is even more powerful, but I almost have to go with what feels right. And that just, the
Right.
first version did not feel right. It just didn't. The second,
Uh-huh.
it was like, yeah, boom, this is it. And I remember my editor reading the second version saying, yes, this is so much better. And the difference was that it came unbidden. Again, I was holding a baby, and then all of a sudden, this whole thing came into my mind. And I thought, well, where had this been before? And what I realized is I think, and I don't know if it works the same for poetry. I think what happens with fiction is it's always working in the background. It's always
Yeah.
okay. The same thing as dream analysis. I'm sure a lot of you do dream analysis. I do it with a group. It's fabulous. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is when I wake up with some of my dreams, I go, I have no idea what the heck's going on there. What is happening? But it works in the background all day. It's going, and then at some point I put it down and I send it to my group and I said, oh my God, because I go back and I rework after doing 20 years of this. It kind of becomes more apparent, and then they'll see the little pockets that I'm missing. I look at novel writing the same way. It's not different. It is like a dream, except that it has to come into a structure, and that's where you have to do a little bit of massaging. But the actual essence, if we can call it that, is exactly like a dream.
Wow, because it's the exact same way I think about it in terms of poetry as well. It's the unconscious speaking to you in images, and whether you're writing a novel or a poem or maybe even painting it, you're bringing it out to consciousness,
Yeah, yeah,
where it can be read or seen or felt more concretely.
right.
And yeah, so it's the same root, the dream, the unconscious, that dark space, the liminality of it. So, and it's a form of active imagination, would you say, right?
Absolutely,
Engaging with,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's the other word
And maybe
reason.
even more so with novels because you've got characters and those characters live and breathe on the page and you are engaging with them. You're not only giving them life, but you're also letting them be,
Right. Well,
which is very interesting.
the letting them be is so important, Rula, right? So in my
Uh-huh.
first novel, I'm writing about these six women, and there was one who's on the margins called Asuncion, right? Silly name for any English person. I don't know why I chose it, but she came to me as Ascension. So there you are, Asuncion. So she's off in the margins, and I'm writing this novel, and I think I don't know what to do with this sister. She's then married sister. A lot of them are because they're just destined for tragedy. But she just knocked me in the head one day, just walked into the page and took over the narrative. And in doing that, it was like, what? And I just went with it. I thought, okay, let's see what happens here. And she becomes central. She's the wisdom keeper of all the women, but again, came out of left field and took over. So yes, no, it is like a form of active imagination. I actually, look, I told my group one day back years ago, I made them write a fairy tale. And what I said to them is, I want
Mhm.
to hear about your life, but I don't want to hear about your life. I really don't want to hear about you. I'm born here and I married this person. I don't care. I want you to take your life and put it into fairy tale form. And it has to be 3 pages. And we had a weekend where we got together and everybody brought their fairy tale. We all ended up in tears because somehow through the vehicle of telling it through like once upon a time, you're able to detach from the actual narrative, like what happened, right? No matter how harsh or whatever. And somehow the truth came out, the truth about things that we thought we had processed and had not
Mhm.
been. And it was a really intense experience. And I realized that that gave you the distance to not, because I think we get caught in our stories, we get trapped by our narratives and our histories and our memories. And we all know what happens when that happens. You end up in Jungian analysis for years trying to, unscramble this. But what was great about this is it bypassed everything. And that's what gave me the idea. I thought, well, people should be doing this all the time because things you don't want to talk about somehow end up on the page. And what was interesting is when the person presented it, they thought they knew what it was about. No, no. When it was with the group was able to tell them. And by the way, as a novelist, I love being invited to readers' clubs. I always say, if you invite me to your club, I will come anytime because they have told me more about my novel, okay, than I know
Wow.
about myself. Does that not happen with your poetry? Somebody says something, you
Oh,
think, really?
absolutely.
It's great. Yeah. Such a gift. Such a gift. We have a new media. I have a new member of my group from Australia who started doing an analysis of invocation. I went, what? It's like, it was like,
Wow.
whoa, this is great. I can't believe it. And I'm so immensely grateful to people. It's almost like they're providing a full analysis to you when they're doing it. Another reason to do these things. But if you belong to a group or you're doing work with a group, and I actually do love group work. I know that Jungians are not very happy with Jung group, or not very. I think the original first generation Jungians, but actually I found a lot to be gained from working as a collective, especially with dream analysis, right? Because what starts to happen is you almost feel like the dream that is being presented is your dream. It's hard to even tell you what goes on, but some weird thing happens where people seem to be having dreams that are connected. So it's a really cool thing. But I think I like it because of what happens in these clubs, and I see that you're getting you wonder, well, why are you noticing that character? First of all, it tells you a little bit about them, which is interesting, why they're noticing one thing and not the other. But then they'll tell you something that you never consciously put in there, because you're mostly unconscious when you're working on this, and you think, oh my lord. So it's a great gift, and it's another reason to do this for sure.
Wow. And how would you suggest that writers engage with the story and with the characters without over controlling it in this
Yeah,
sense or allowing the unconscious to participate? Are there
yeah.
any tips and tricks that you use? Or is it
Uh,
just
the,
it
yeah.
happens?
It happens. Well, I mean, look, I'm assuming every writer is a great reader. All I do is read. I mean, my whole life has been a life of reading. I can't really say I've done anything else. So I think to myself, the best thing to prime my unconscious is to read other people's work,
Mm.
weirdly, just because it gets me going. It gets me to this other world, and then I can get away from the reality of, that's out there, which is a little bit harsher and a little bit more whatever. And actually, some of the reading you might do may be into worlds that are very harsh. But for me, that's the first step. Secondly, how do I do it? Honestly, the intention is at the beginning. I'll go with what happened already with Invocation because I'm still sorting out this new one. Invocation was me coming out with, how do these two people get together? What is the conflict that is at the root of it? And then the conflict became a larger. I thought, well, in society we have a real conflict with people dismissing, Jungians, let's say archetypes. I have a lot of scientists in my network who just, you mentioned the word archetype and they blanch because it's like how, it's just something they can't wrap their heads around. So this is in the culture, right? And then I thought, well, what better thing than to try to create a love story between two people with very diverse, very, very different and conflicting viewpoints. And so then when the thing started downloading, what was actually downloading were the scenes, right, that were coming. Now, this is kind of a weird novel because in between it, there's 10 podcast episodes where they're having a conversation, right? So it was my only way I could introduce a nonfiction element where I discuss everything from Moby Dick, the Edinger Moby Dick, to fairy tales, to dreams, to everything. I put it all in there. But in the outside, what was happening, which was really cool, were these other characters that were showing up to try to flesh out the story. And so, what I recommend is to trust the unconscious, trust it enough, and don't try to direct it too much. And in that, I think the work that Jung proposes in active imagination, and all the people that have written about this, and if you've done this with an analyst, really is very helpful because it tells you that, you have to believe in whatever shows up. So when they show up, I believe these characters. I know they're a part of me. It's like every part of the dream is you too, right? But hey, they're like unknown parts of me, right? And so, and what's great about a novel is you can have a character like I have, who's Danny in my Invocation, who's really, really over the top and completely crazy the way she's living her life. And I think, oh, that's a reality that's in me somewhere. I'm just not living it out in a traditionally out there world. So yeah, I would say trust your unconscious, which isn't very different from the whole Jungian notion of doing the same thing within an analytical context. The structure, though, is something that you work on, right? If you're trying to write a novel, honestly, reading novels, I was once asked to teach a course, teach how to write, and I thought, I can't do that. I don't know how to write. Honestly, I do not know. I've never technically learned, was never part of an MFA program. I just read a lot of books, right? That's it. Read a lot of books and just trust your unconscious to tell whatever story it needs to. And also trust that someone might want to listen to it. Like the other interesting thing is, look, there's so many writers out there and so many stories, and we all gravitate to different stories, but there's nothing more beautiful for a writer to connect with the reader. There really isn't. And I'm sure the same thing with a poet, connecting with somebody who understands the essence of what their work is about. It just makes you come alive. And it's an instant connection from the heart. That's all I can say. And this is what I finally recognized. I'm not an intellectual writer. I try so hard to be an intellectual writer. I try so hard to be an intellectual. It's a big joke because I'm not, because I'm so embarrassed about being, and this is how I connected it, by the way. I'm so embarrassed. I had to dig. I'm a Canadian, right? And I'm a Spaniard. I'm so embarrassed about the emotionality that comes with being Spanish. And that took me a long time to get to. And that's probably why I ended up doing graduate work in England, right? It was almost a way to come up with, and then I thought, well, why am I? Now it's the opposite, by the way. Now I'm totally reveling. But I realized because that's my feeling side. And the feeling side, if you're publishing in the world, you will realize that, the Ian McEwans of the world and the very intellectual types of writers often get, even though, by the way, 70% of the readers of novels are women, interesting enough, it's the male writers that often get, these incredible reviews about these incredible worlds that are very intellectually based. And I think I somehow had bought into that idea and I felt embarrassed. And so that's what the novels revealed to me. And now I think that's insane, and I'm working on a completely different level. But it took me writing that novel to admit to myself that I was working on inherent insecurity. I felt living as a Spaniard. I arrived in Canada when there were few Spanish speakers, by the way, tons of them here now. Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities. By the time I arrived, I felt like I didn't belong. And it's bizarre that it spent all this time through my novels understanding that I shut a whole part of myself down. So yes, a big gift from writing. It's the best analysis I've had. No Jungian analysis has allowed me to get to where I think I'm at right now. And I could be deluded and tomorrow, something else could come up. But that's been a fundamental problem. And it's shown up in every one of my novels. And if you look at Dostoevsky, if you look at some of the writers you like, right? Watch to see what not, it's a little bit like if you listen to Mozart's music, it's instantly recognizable. You just know Mozart, right? You know Wagner. There's a style. Go look at the work of your favorite writers and see if there isn't a theme that constantly, that unresolved chord keeps showing up in different ways. And even if they can't help it. I admire a Canadian writer here by the name of David Adams Richards. He only wrote 5 novels. And then he said, I've written enough. And I thought, that's actually pretty brave. I like that. He doesn't feel he has to keep, He's actually been appointed to the Canadian Senate. He's fabulous. Love him. In his book, which are his best, which is the last one he wrote, is Mercy Among the Children. It's almost like he's building up to that last kind of statement. It's all about compassion and about how we treat the outsider. And he's writing about small communities in New Brunswick, small place, but the striving for that compassionate core is there, and then it's just majestic by the time you get to the dignity of treating people as humans. A story we need so much today. That's where artists can really help, because our narrative has just gone so derailed. And I think artists are often ahead of the game. They're able to come up with stories that, maybe bring the heart back in. And I was rejecting the very thing that needs to be brought back into the consciousness, which is what Jung identified: the feminine, the feeling side. And because I was embarrassed about it. And here's a language thing that's really interesting, okay? It's just so important to me. I just happened to read this as a coincidentally or synchronistically. Somebody did an analysis of the German and the Arabic language, right? And they noticed, and this is because I love McGilchrist's work, it really came to me. They noticed that the Arabic language was much connected almost interhemispherically, right, across the hemispheres, which is, by the way, how women's brains are also wired. Whereas the German was very much like connected within a hemisphere, which is how the masculine is. And somehow I had bought into the Germanic way of seeing things. But but I can understand it. That's what we're doing. We're buying into a way of seeing things that is completely imbalanced, and it's actually showing up in our stories. I had the great luck that I studied as an undergraduate with a guy who was an expert on language, and he read my novels and he said to me, without saying anything, he said, "You think in Spanish when you write, don't you?" And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because," and these were the first two novels, because by the third novel I was much more, it was a different type of novel. He said, "Because the amount of subordinate clauses in your sentences and the way you go off and like tributaries." And I said, "Yeah, I guess that's the way Spanish is." So encoded in all of this, I'm going off in a million different directions. I apologize. I'm recognizing that what was in me is a story that's out there, and it's a big one. It's like we need to recover this feeling function. And it does no world of good to me or anybody if I shut myself down because I'm so embarrassed about it. But that's how I felt, like I didn't belong in academia, like I didn't belong. So anyway, a long story short, trust your unconscious. It will take you exactly to where you need to be in terms of whatever it is that you're, if you're going with my metaphor of the unresolved chord, wherever that is.
But yeah, that is so funny that you mentioned that because I have the exact same experience with poetry. Um, but it's also the opposite. Because my background, also being from the Eastern Mediterranean, bilingual English and Arabic, I am a very emotional person. The language that I use when I think in my native tongue is a very emotional language. And you would think that poetry is the perfect medium, the perfect container for that because you could pour out your feelings as much as you want. But I've been told by my editors at almost every single session that it is too emotional. And I need to tone it down. I need to calm down a bit. At some point, one of my editors said, "You know how your poem sounds like? It sounds like somebody just randomly walked into a room and started screaming." So, of
Okay.
course, we don't want that. And yes, I do get what you mean by feeling embarrassed sometimes and yeah, feeling the need to tone it down.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I just can't. You know,
Yeah.
I'm very I'm still stuck there. And it also happened during my PhD dissertation. So I've had to rewrite chapters many times because they sounded too emotional, or if you would want to interpret it in more academic language, it sounded naive
Oh,
because
wow.
of the emotionality in it. So you
Right.
can't be emotional when speaking about negative capability. You can't be emotional when speaking about joys. Um, so yeah, sometimes we are trained to tone and hone this part of ourselves. And yeah, I mean it's really funny when you brought it up. I totally related to it. And yeah, so
It,
it's
it's
I
funny in
guess it
my,
is what it is.
well, it is what it is, but I think we have to strike back here. This is what I've learned, okay, after many years. It took me so long. I shouldn't be this old to figure it out. But I had to strike it out in myself first to stop with that immigrant story of I don't belong or blah, blah, blah. I actually had the experience of
Yeah.
being anyway, to go back to what you were saying, in my case, it manifested with my editors at HarperCollins saying, these sentences are too long. And I stuck with it. I said, no, they're the length they need to be. You're not touching them. And because I thought, no, I mean, okay, I'm no Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but he has a sentence that goes on for 122 pages, I think. This is insane, right? There's no reason you should limit the sentence is what it is. That's how I was thinking. It was kind of a stream of consciousness. But I think
Yeah.
what we're both talking about is that in general, and this very much relates to the Jung story, right? There is a tamping down on the feminine, which is very
Yeah.
circular. It's very emotional. It has sentences that have tributaries. It's not Hemingway, I like Hemingway, but maybe not all the time. I was delighted to find Gabriel Garcia Marquez's work when I was younger. It was like, oh my God, someone who's in my world. And then I found someone Rushdie, and I thought, oh, another one who's, and I thought these people are thinking in these incredibly long, beautiful, mythical. They're just fabulous. But they also gave me permission to feel. to say this is okay. But it was so funny. I shut down so much after that first novel. And it was all only because of one review. Most of the reviews were quite positive, but one pointed out the emotionality. And it just, how you always notice the dark, the dark, and then you kind of put everything aside. And I started toning myself down then. And it probably affected my personality as well. I'm not quite sure because I can't really affect my, I mean, I can't, obviously, as you can tell, it's hard to really see that it affected my personality. But it was in that world, I thought, oh, I can't be serious. Because the thing about Canada is publishers here publish literary fiction. They don't publish, mass market. We have too much competition. I mean, it's not geared that way. We have so much competition in the States, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to be a serious writer. And I mistook serious for totally unemotional. Like you can't, which is ridiculous. There are plenty of writers who are emotional and serious. Anyway, it was my own insecurities that were coming to the foreground. But what was interesting is that even now, as I'm embarking on a new novel, the conflict is still there. Still there.
Uh-huh.
I'm just reading it in a different way, understanding that it's there, and then instead of dismissing it, engaging with it. And how am I doing that? Through my dreams. The dreams are revealing it every night, and it's almost comical sometimes because the night before I would have given it much more serious in my mind. My voice takes on that serious, attempt at being a serious writer, and I have the dream that compensates totally against it by saying you're a joke. Don't do that, right? And vice versa, where I get too much on the emotional side. Then I thought, you know what? Dreams are compensatory, right? They're trying to compensate, they're trying to balance the psyche. These two voices in my head need balance, and that's all it's doing. It's going up and down. Well, what happened to me with this new novel, it's a fantasy. So I've never written fantasy, so I've read like 400 of them in the last, it's crazy how many I've read. And so I have the kind of overall structure. I sort of know what's happening, and then these characters are showing up every day in the middle of whatever I'm doing. But I won't start writing until I have the go ahead. Like I just there'll be something. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but something will click, and I go, okay, time to go, and then I just start writing, and it's a torrent. It just comes out. But it's a long incubation period until I'm ready to do that. So I'm getting there, but not sure I'm there yet. Yeah.
Hmm. It's a journey
Oh, it's a
and it's a
huge
path.
journey. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. But it's a journey that I encourage everybody to take. Again, like I don't think you have to write necessarily for publication. My argument is that fiction gives you permission to allow active imagination to happen. Does that make sense? Like you're
Hmm.
welcoming these things, but and you're saying I'm not like when a character comes in, like a character will come in, and when a character dies in my head, I feel the emotion as if I've known. The only time I've experienced this is doing hypnosis. I once did a past life regression, and you really think you're in the story, wherever you want to interpret it metaphorically or literally, it doesn't matter. I think it's metaphor. I love the metaphor because what happens with hypnosis is it's just self-hypnosis. So the consciousness is reduced enough that you can let the unconscious speak a bit. And in those stories that you create in that state, which you're still totally awake anyway, but your threshold is diminished a bit. You really believe it's happening. You really believe whatever story, and you really feel the emotion. And so this is what I feel when I'm writing novels, and when I'm really engaged with it. And so when people say technique, whatever, I can't teach you anything about technique. I really have no idea. I'm not even sure I know what I'm doing. Right? Most authors will tell you that you need a great copy editor afterwards because they catch all the kind of insanity that you didn't even see happening. But if you're just looking at the actual story, it is get acquainted with the whole notion of active imagination, then trust the psyche to give you whatever it is, and then and let it go. Let's just see where it takes you. But by all means, do not try to massage it into a bestseller or to massage it into this is what I think is happening a lot. Oh, okay. And by the way, I mean, genre fiction does this. It's fine. There's genre fiction. You go there, you want to write a story that's going to sell to a lot. That's okay. I'm talking about if you're doing it as a form of self-exploration, then you really do want to know all the characters, even though some of the characters are making you completely uncomfortable, and some of them will totally make you uncomfortable. And that's, I think, where the real key or the real magic, if that's a word you can use, lies. And just being so receptive to that happening. And happening like on a consistent basis. You basically say to yourself, okay, I want a story. This is the parameters. What's going to show up, right? And of course, if you've written enough, and I've thrown away novels too, by the way, I think every writer has thrown away at least 2 or 3 novels, completed novels, because they just didn't work, and you're smart enough to know this is really bad. I still go back and I still see the same themes showing up. Now, what's interesting is I'm now aware of it. I kind of like didn't want to be aware of it. So will that change? This is what I'm trying to see. What my unconscious is going to do with it. Will it change this new novel? Is it going to manifest in the same way? So far, I'm not quite sure because it's like the characters are still forming themselves, but it'll be interesting to see. And this is why I think it's such a great journey. I mean, this is what we're here for, right? We're here to explore really the inner world. And this is an easy way to do it, you know? Have I convinced anybody? Read a novel. I'm
So
telling everybody all the
exciting
time.
when you say it. It's so exciting, Bea. It sounds like an adventure, actually. And there's so much trust in the process, that it's fascinating. You trust the
Is it
process, and as you said, there's every writer has thrown one or two of their novels at some point. So
more?
it's not just about getting there, but it's like a moment of reflection. So where did this get me? If it didn't get me anywhere, then I don't need it anymore. Then it's probably I need to be looking somewhere else. But that is so beautiful. That's so powerful. Thank you so much. I mean, now you made me want to go and try writing a novel
You
or
have to.
dabbling with stories.
You all must.
We
I
are
swear.
all storytellers.
We are, and my argument is the story your unconscious tells you is so much more powerful than the one your conscious
Yeah.
mind is telling you. You know, that's where all
Uh-huh.
our like the ones we tell ourselves consciously are limiting. Often they're silly, and that they trap us in narratives that don't serve us. The unconscious tells you completely. It tells you the truth, and sometimes it's kind of dark. But that's okay because that makes you, at least to
Yeah.
me, it makes me more interesting to myself. Because I generally, if I'm in a
Hmm.
normal conversation, I think I'm not interested in myself at all. I'm interested in everybody around me, but I have to admit, I'm more interested in their unconscious than I'm interested in their conscious selves too. Um, in my own group, I really don't care. We don't talk about marriages and kids, and that's not important. I'm more interested in their dreams because their dreams really are revealing who they are, unfiltered, right? So, and as I get older, I really am having less and less patience for the conversation you have around the dinner table. The chit chatting. It's just like I don't care. I can't solve the world's problems. I don't have an opinion because honestly, the world is too complicated for me. But what I can see is somebody, okay, this is the way you look at it. I always notice what people are passionate about. I'm just so interested in that because, again, in terms of when you go to a group, a reading group, each person will tell you what they noticed. I'm so interested in people's obsessions, like what they really love, which may seem to the other person, I can't understand why they really love it. I'm not judging it. I want to know because I think it fundamentally tells you about a need they're feeling or filling. And so to me, this is all part of the same thing that our unconscious stories are much more powerful than the conscious ones. And this is just an avenue into them. Having a dream
Hmm.
group, I think, is another way too, by the way, just because I've had one and it's been fabulous that way too. And anything that takes you into the archetypal realm is so powerful as well. And then, look, by the way, I also appreciate, Rula, I love your book on Jung because I think I love Joyce and I love Yeats, and you did an incredible job, by the way, of looking at their work. And I'm glad you didn't tone down the sentences. I'm glad you didn't.
Thank
You're not naive. I think what you are is you're hitting
you.
on something, yeah, do you know what I mean? Like you're hitting on that feeling state. Why do we go to movies? Why do we read books? Because we want to. Why would we listen to music? I mean, how much is being said about Taylor Swift right
Interesting.
now? We want to connect to
Mhm.
something greater, right? And that's through the feeling function. You don't connect. I mean, intellectually is great. I love it. I love ideas. I love reading books, but it's really when I connect through the feeling side that I feel something is fundamentally shifted in my body. I become almost more embodied. I don't know if everybody feels the same way. Is that how you feel when you're writing poetry?
Absolutely. Yep.
That's it. That's the key.
Yeah.
That's totally the key.
Well, Bea, this has been wonderful. We're not done yet, but what we're
Okay.
going to do right now is we are going to open the floor for the audience because I'm pretty sure that there are so many questions and comments out there. But this is terrific. I
Thank
always
you, Rula.
learn so much from you, Bea. And your novels, I mean, they're absolutely the best. I
Thank
highly
you.
recommend Bea's novels. The first one I read was the Mapmaker's Opera, and I loved it. So thank you. It's a huge honor having you with us
Thank
today.
you. Thank you.
And we have around 15 minutes for questions for Q&A. So lovely, Sarah. Do you see any questions in the chat box, or is there anybody with their hand raised that I can't see?
Not yet. But I would say, Bea, this has been uh just amazing.
Thank you.
I felt this. I know Labrac has a conference coming up about alchemy, and
Oh, yeah.
it really felt very much like you're talking about creating this alchemical container within the space of the novel, and then letting this process happen. And I think that's just such a beautiful example to everyone of how you can hold that creative space, no matter your medium, be it poetry, novels, artwork, and pulling the dreams into that. I'm a longtime dream worker, and I think it's really lovely how you talk about how, pulling on these characters and the dreams and sort of weaving them together. And what feels to me like ties so much of that in the same space is that emotion and the feeling, and that then, moves on to the readers and really makes these unique and specific stories a universal space that everyone can live into. So thank you so much for this. It's been beautiful.
You're very welcome. And mentioning alchemy is right there. That's the whole process is alchemical. That's what makes it so powerful. As Jung said, the alchemists didn't know that they were working on themselves really as they're going. Well, doing this kind of creative work is working on yourself. And it's exciting because of that. And you never know where you're going to end up. It's very neat. So thank you. That's a great connection.
And I see Ray has his hand up.
Yes. Bea, thank you for this great talk. I'm interested in all of this discussion about emotion. My students would ask me, how can I get an A on this piece of writing? And I quickly brought them to silence when I said, make me cry. So in studying poetry with Charles Simic, he always mentioned no emotion in the writer, no emotion in the reader. So it seemed to me that emotion would be something that you would want to evoke. So I'm also very interested in, because I do a lot of writing, but not a lot of publishing, the relationship with the editors who say to you, your writing's too emotional. Are these editors noted writers themselves, or are they just good businessmen? Or what's the relationship between a writer who's doing all this unconscious work and an editor who is reading it, but is working maybe on another level?
Oh, I'll speak to it, and I think Rula, you can probably speak to this as well. In my own case, with the two that were published with HarperCollins here, my editor was fabulous. She actually had very little. She made a comment once about the sentences being too long, and I said, yeah, that's going to stay. The copy editor is a totally different game because they come in to correct, sentence like issues of language clarity or things, little tweaks, and even there you do have the option to say no, I won't go with it. So in my case, the only thing, and I do think editors do have an eye to business. So what I was being developed in those days was a Spanish American Canadian writer, right? Oh, because we have a lot of ethnic writers, like we have Italian writers and whatever. And my books, even though they were written in English, were set in Spain and Mexico, so they were being set in another. And this is one of the great things about Canadian publishing; it's very welcoming to that, so that was great. So I didn't really have. It was my own reaction to critics, maybe to a couple of the reviews I received, where it was like, oh, this is too much. There's a too muchness. Now there happens to be too muchness about my characters. So it didn't really surprise me, but that's what reined me in more than anything. But my editors really at HarperCollins were more about just developing you as a writer. And where the break came is when I said I don't really want to write the same type of narrative anymore. And then there's a break because I think they are developing along a certain line. And then it is a business decision. I think we all have to understand that it is, no matter what you do. But Rula, you were told specifically about the emotion, and that's something that came from them, right?
Yeah, exactly. But especially with the academic writing, which is why arts-based research is a bit different. It's very different actually because it is a much larger space for emotions. Um, but also for that reason, you would think that when writing poetry, you could give your emotions free rein. But again, I think this is also very cultural because, for instance, Arabic poetry is supercharged with emotions. And you could stack in as many synonyms as you want to say one thing You could have like a whole line of synonyms to say the word love.
Yeah.
Whereas in English, it's considered wordiness.
Yeah.
You need to replace that by an image, let the image speak. Language has its own space, but it's also, you're an economist of words. So yeah, that is the major difference and challenge as well.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do it. I mean, simply,
Mm.
I just couldn't. At
Yeah.
some points, if my editor didn't tell me exactly what to do, I didn't know how to feel less about things.
Right. Right. And that's a tragedy in my view anyway, you know, it's just ridiculous. But it
Yeah,
is, I think, a language issue and a cultural issue, right? You know,
yeah,
if you read Spanish writers, there's a lot of adjectives. I'm sorry. It's wordier. You know,
exactly.
it's just,
Yeah.
and I happen to enjoy it because I think, yes, I like this. You're brought more into the heart in some ways, right? But it doesn't make people particularly comfortable. But maybe that's not the point
Mm-hmm.
of, the point of good writing may not be to make you feel comfortable, actually. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my own experience. Yeah.
Mhm.
I would say instead of being an economist of words, I think of the words of the poet William Stafford. We must become priests of the
Oh,
imagination.
oh yeah,
And,
William Stafford.
you
Hmm.
know, that
I
was,
like that.
Yeah,
that
it's
was a
beautiful.
great one too. And it's funny because I would start my students were high school students, and I would start them off reading what was called adolescent fiction, things where they could relate to the topics and of people their own age. And then we would move slowly during the year into classics in their independent reading program. And it got to the point where many of the students just abandoned the adolescent reading altogether. Once they went to
Hmm.
the classics, that's all they wanted to read. But the two features of the classic novels that they noted were uh, special diction, you know, your choice of words, and then the length of sentences. And that length of sentences was a sign of a great writer like Dickens or Proust. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me for sure.
Mhm.
I see we have Deanna has her hand up. And then David, you next. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation, Bea. And I started in the humanities and wound up in the social sciences just by chance. I didn't know what I was doing. I just, was in this program and I just kept on going. So so I'm a social scientist. However, I've been spending the last few years since the COVID era recovering my voice. And that was an opportunity for me to attend workshops on poetry, and then to give myself permission to write and be emotional again, and to express myself in words and run on sentences if I felt like it, and feel that I wanted to see and feel texture when I wrote and delivered my word, spoken word. And so I wanted to say that the space that at the London Arts-Based Research Center is so important because it allows people this opportunity to exercise this a voice that many places in society don't may not want to hear because it's not scientific.
Yeah.
That it's not going to solve a disease, that it's not that. But I think for our soul, our essence, our well-being, our sanity, we absolutely need to be in touch with so many facets inside us, as you have been explaining, Bea, with the tumult inside, the struggles inside, and how those go on, and they may be connected to the factors outside, and how we respond to them and how we care about them. So thank you so much for your presentation and highlighting that the struggle that is so real, and that we have to be aware of. And I've done presentations that are that are just, I really wanted to do, that are very at the London Arts-Based Research Center. And I didn't know if I was going to get credit for it at work or not. And I told myself, I really don't care. I want to do them, and I want to do this analysis. I will do it, and I have tenure, so I guess I could say that type of
That's good
thing.
though.
It allows me the freedom
Yes.
to say, you don't want to give points to it? I'm not going to fight it. Go ahead. Don't give points to it. Like, fine. I think, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It matters. What matters to me
Yeah.
is I
Yeah.
got to work on it. I got to dream about it. I got to feel it. And then I got to share it with other people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I love the word texture and I love the word sharing. I think a book is dead after I write it unless other people have a conversation with me about it. And that's the most, for me, the most fulfilling part of it, right? Somebody engaging in a conversation with something that came out of your unconscious. It is such a gift. I am so thankful to readers who do this. I cannot tell you. It's like you put yourself out, but then you're rewarded immensely. It's quite powerful.
Thank you. Go ahead, David.
Good evening from Japan.
Oh, wow. Good
We
evening.
have a beautiful full moon out. So I
Oh,
don't know
yes,
if the
it is. It
moon
is full
somehow
moon
is
day, yes.
affecting our conversation. Yeah, it's a super moon too, which means we've
It
got
is,
one
yeah.
October, November, and December, 3 in a row. So that 3 number is very good. I was
yeah.
watching some of the SophiaCycles tonight just to remind myself. And I saw a lot about Tristan and what you mentioned about Wagner. And I also mentioned, I saw something about Robert Bly, something that you
Yes.
had done with Robert Bly. And so back to the American poet William Stafford, who I truly respect. So I'm glad that he was mentioned as well. He has a book, A Glass Face in the Rain, which is really nice. And also Traveling Through the Dark, which is a really good poem that affected me when I was undergraduate. Mary Oliver also has some beautiful work. And she told me that the work of the world is to look at the world. And I'm going to go one step further and say you need to feel the world as well. I'm here in Japan writing haiku, and so I understand the limitations with language. And my Japanese is not that good, but I think that's a plus because if I had too much language and too much knowledge, I would embellish something beyond 575 and it would just be a mess. It would be, I would scrap most of it and not really write. And you've given me a lot of inspiration tonight. The unknown part of me and bring the heart back in. I think that's a really good image that we do need to bring the heart back in, especially whatever times we're going through, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, whatever time you're going through when the world is at unrest, even now, you bring the heart back in, connect, have people. It does feel good when you're in a poetry group and 2 or 3 people like your poem for reasons that you don't even realize. It's like, well, no, I was just writing about the moon, but if you want to talk about tide and,
Yes.
cycles, whatever, I was just, it's sunlight. That's basically what the moonlight is. It's sunlight. So it's the animus and the anima, the male and the female, that union together, which I think is so important.
Yeah.
And it is a gift, and that's what you mentioned earlier. So my question for you is, have you ever considered writing poetry?
I have, but I'm too intimidated. We all have an area that every time I talk to a poet, I bow down to all of you. It's something, and I'll tell you why. It's funny. I think poetry requires a precision in some ways, although you say no, it does require a huge amount of precision.
Oh,
and
that's the Virgo in me. Yes, Virgo.
Yes, okay. The Virgo would know,
energy.
absolutely.
Virgo
I teach
energy.
archetypal astrology as part of my gig, so I totally understand the Virgo, the Virgo archetype. I feel that I'm messy, if that makes sense. I am so boundaryless when I'm writing that it's like everything's spilling over, that I'm not quite sure I can have the discipline. I don't know if I'm making myself clear on this, to actually do something in that short form, which is probably why I think, a novel gives me a lot of space to just throw paint at the wall and sort of somehow reorganize itself.
Poetry.
Yeah.
Free verse poetry would give you all the freedom you need.
I probably would have to really study it.
Yeah, well, like a collection of poems feels like a novel, sort of.
Yeah,
Each
that
poem
is
has
true.
its own independence. So it kind of feels like if you got 50 poems together, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is a lot.
No, it is.
A good friend of mine, Bella Reynolds, introduced me to you in
Oh,
Invocations,
Bella, I love
and
her.
this
Yes, she's
whole,
part of my
so
group.
Bella is
Amazing.
wonderful. She's got her
Amazing.
spirit, her embodiment.
Yes.
Um,
Amazing.
yeah, so cheers to you, Bella. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah,
Cheers
so
back.
that's my question, just if you've ever considered poetry. And
I
I do
think I would.
appreciate you. And I think yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me an idea. If I ever stop being less, and because all the writers all the poets you mentioned, I love reading poetry, but I just feel like I don't have the talent for it. It's a thought. Maybe I could try one day, but it feels like maybe something as I get older, I might get I might get the courage. I think it requires courage to do something different. At least for me, the way I'm looking at it. And by the way, I say that because I
Yes.
so respect poets. If I didn't respect them in Bezier, go okay, but I respect poetry enough to know can I really do this at this moment? I don't think I can. I don't think I'm able to, but it's something I would think about for sure.
Everybody's a poet,
Well,
Bea. I think you should
I
try.
know, but some are better. It's like, well, I'm getting
join
trapped.
us. Join us.
Well, I
Please
think, by the way,
do.
you guys, just the people who've taught, you guys are such a great collection. Rula, it's a tribute to you that you've managed to drive such incredibly interesting and powerful people. That often
Thank
it's
you.
the person who forms it that actually attracts, because these people are like really the kind of people you want to have at your dinner table because you know you're going to have really good conversations and we're not going to get trapped in. And by the way, one thing I would like to say is that I think the answer to all the dislocation that's happening is conversation. It's conversation.
Mhm.
It's sharing of ideas in a vulnerable way. And I think all of these things we're talking about allow for vulnerability. And that means you do
Yeah.
have to expose your feeling nature and you do have to feel, and I don't think that's happening enough because too many people are screaming at each other and not enough is
Mm.
happening of this nature. So what you're doing, Rula, is you're creating a space for where this kind of conversation, which is so much deeper than the average conversation. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm having trouble with, this is a confession, I'm having trouble adjusting to normal conversation anymore. I just want to have these types of conversations because I don't find anything gets resolved. And yet when I have these kind of interactions, it's like you're filling a cup, you just feel different afterwards. Something's been stitched together. And so good for you, Rula, for creating a space for this. I
Thank
encourage
you, Bea. And I
lots of
think
people to
we
do
are
this.
all the space. We are all spaces. You are an
Yeah,
amazing space as well. And what you're doing with Sophia
Mm,
Cycles is just
mm,
incredible.
yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
And yeah, it's the space within. We need to externalize it sometimes and turn it into community and exchange our, as you probably would say, pieces of our unconscious
Yeah,
with one another.
yeah, yeah.
Exchange dreams, try to interpret, try to understand together. And of course, I mean, especially after lockdown and so many things and phases that the world has been going through lately, we feel the need for conversation. And
Yeah.
this is what had actually started Psych Creative. It started during lockdown, and it started because of the need to talk about something meaningful with others who share the same need, not necessarily the same interests, but the same need. And thank you for making this space today, Bea.
Well, thank you for
It's
inviting me.
really
I really enjoyed it. This is great. I bow
thank
to
you.
all of you. Thank you.
And I think we have time for one more question before we move on to our next phase of Psych Creative. So is there anybody who would like to say something? Hillary.
Yes, hi. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'm actually sick in bed, but um, I just wanted to, there were so many things that were said that were so deeply intriguing to me. And one thing I wanted to touch upon was the healing of the masculine and feminine, the masculine and feminine split, and how I think particularly for female authors, regardless of genre, um, how really coming into coherency um, in our voice is so vital right now in terms of how we're healing really our relationship to each other and to ourselves. And I was reminded of a woman by the name of Gloria Anzaldúa, who wrote the book Borderlands, and she's a Spanish author. And I guess what came up for me is like she so powerfully speaks about living in two worlds, two cultures, two languages, and how multilingualism and multiculturalism is so important right now for understanding our relationship to time and place and space. And then lastly, this is a little bit long-winded, but the last thing I just wanted to say is what you both each referenced in terms of being like sort of battling internally with feeling like, am I too emotional? Or even being told by an editor when presenting a dissertation that you had to tone it down. And this double bind that we as women live with in terms of like being too much or not enough, and how we have to grapple with this. And then, you know, it's just bizarre because 35 years ago, I wrote a thesis and it was called Feminine Language Moving Through Imagination, Rewriting the Body and the Madness of Subjectivity. And subjectivity, and it sounds like a mouthful, but essentially, it's how women have to reside in this world that is phallo logocentric. And yet women are they're multiple. We're the multiplicity of our bodies is cyclical. And so when you really begin to understand this, it makes perfect sense that women are told that they're mad or untamed, that they're screeching and yelling, that it's something that is, so unacceptable in a very linear, rational world. And so I just want to honor you both for bringing that up. I found that to be so immensely powerful. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hillary. And if you don't mind, if you could please share the title of your thesis in the chat, I would love to have a look at it.
I will share it, but it was like literally my undergrad degree. It was like 35 years ago. No one's going to be able to find it. But I would love to be able to continue it and learn more about both of your work. And but I'll put it in the chat anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Yeah, I think it would be wonderful if you developed the work, and it's definitely a voice that we need to hear more of.
I will also add, just as another thing, that I find a lot of that men are also subject to the same thing, that they're not able to express emotions safely sometimes because, and I think James Hollis really addresses this so well in his book Under Saturn's Shadow, where they're not given permission to be emotional, and that's just as tragic. It's tragic for us women and for them. And I think part of expanding our world is to just allow them to be emotional too and encourage it. I have two young men, and I've encouraged it from day one. And that's I think my best success in life, that I have two young men that I raise who are extremely able to and who are incredibly open about their emotions. And that's something we need to do with men as well, because it's just it's a whole story. The feminine just constantly being suppressed,
Absolutely. Thank you, Bea. And well, I guess for those of you who are new here, I will in a minute tell you about what's going to happen next. But first, I want to thank you so much, Bea, for this incredible conversation, which I greatly enjoyed. I can't wait for you to come here to London, and we could have this over dinner.
I'd love to. I'd love to. London is a place I'm happy to visit anytime. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
We'd love to have you here soon.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a great honor. and a pleasure and so much fun. And now for the next part. So we will have a 10-minute break and then we'll come back for some poetry. So this is going to be an open mic. Whoever wants to share a poem that they've got, feel free to just raise your hand and share it with us. So we will be doing that for the rest of the session. So a 10-minute break and then around half an hour of poetry. If you need time to find those poems, please feel free to do so during the break. And we'll be back in a bit. So at 8:27, 8:28 London time.
Okay.
See you in a
All right.
Of them are in the new. Okay. These poems are part of a new manuscript, tentatively titled In the Folds of Time. It's a way of recapturing my youth through dreams and surreal imagery. So this first poem is called Turning Around in Circles. As though tied to a post lassoed by recurrent dreams, vanishing as soon as I open my eyes, I'm lost in the middle of nowhere, a few blocks from my hotel, unable to find my way back. I keep taking the wrong turn, shifting landscapes encircle me inside the cyclorama, flickering familiar stores' lighted signs, give way to muddy trails leading to railroad tracks next to temples sculpted with erotic figures like the bas-reliefs covering the Baron Empin Palace's facade, the eccentric Belgian aristocrat's Hindu temple implanted 4 blocks from my house in Heliopolis, as mythical deities' piercing glances follow me through small streets, forking into deserted alleys where bent silhouettes sweep with tied twigs like automatons, and vendors display makeshift assortments of trinkets next to greasy fast food stalls that spin a deja vu of oniric symbols, giving way to shades riding over trails and rails, casting shadow shows over a proscenium that disappears and reappears at an ever increasing speed, swaying me into a liminal space where no traces of trees, homes, or wheels are to be found, while in the cauldron of my mind, words burn like joss paper, followed by numbers that rise in flames as soon as I try to align them to find my bearings or call for help were I to find a payphone. And the next one is a shorter piece. It's called Last Night I Saw Mom at a Party. She wore a brightly colored dress, but her head was covered by a pharaonic double veil. The first, in silk gauze, was visible over her temples underneath the black velvet. I kept watching her from afar and couldn't understand this headdress a la Tutankhamun. Unlike her mom, who never left the house without a hat and gloves, she seldom used her black lace veil during Mass. When I approached her, she disappeared towards the restrooms and came out in a black spindle dress, her hair pulled back in a low bun a la Farah Diba. Stunned, I wanted to ask her, "Where did you find such beautiful clothes? I'd like to go shopping with you." But people kept cutting in before I could utter a word, and with her usual stern expression, she joined other guests at the dinner table. I opted for resting in the living room that was suddenly inundated with babies, and several ladies flocked around them with doting expressions. Before I could get up from the sofa, a plump baby landed on my lap. I didn't know what to do with him. I put him in a nearby stroller and placed a soft beanie cushion under his head, oblivious of what was going on around me, all the while thinking of Mom's stunning transformation and kept wondering why I could never find anything decent to wear. Thank you.
Mm,
Beautiful. Thank you, Hedy.
mm.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Hedy.
Right, so I see, I guess we'll do a tentative lineup of Ray and then David, and then I see June. And then anybody else, feel free to either message us in the chat or raise your hand once those three have finished. So, Ray?
Yes. These are two poems that are still in my notebook, so I hope I don't stumble over them. And I'm choosing them because I think they have something to do with what we were talking about today. So, where should I be going today is the first one. There is only one thing to say, but 1,000 ways to say it. There is only one way to walk, but 1,000 ways to follow. Yet if you never speak or walk, how will you ever find your way? For the only way to arrive is to follow your own footsteps. And the second one right now is called The Gatekeeper is Not the Source. The gatekeeper is not the source. You can close the gate, keep me out, or open the gate, let me out. The choice is always in your hands, for I am here and I am there. I am dormant deep below, and I am flourishing beyond. I exceed the speed of all light, and yet I am immovable. You can close the gate upon me, but I remain ubiquitous. For I am deep inside of you and can live without you as well. So why not just let me come in, since I'm already sleeping beneath this opening iris and soaring above Denali. Now, what I should have said at the beginning was, if you don't know it, Denali is a mountain, tallest mountain in the U.S. It's in Alaska, and it's the one that was just renamed back to Mount McKinley. For a while, it's taken on the Native American name Denali. So I should have said that at the beginning.
Thank you, Ray. Lovely.
Thank you.
All right, David?
Well, I have to follow a mountain. Okay. I have 3 poems. They're very short, so the reading should be maybe less than 2 minutes. I'll start with a haiku, of course, because I'm in Japan, but the other 2 are a little more universal or maybe accessible. I'm not reading Japanese, but I do write in Japanese. So the first one, here we go. Haiku. Moccasin flowers slipping into the beauty of another world. Moccasin flowers slipping into the beauty of another world. Noon. A billowing goddess dressed in white silk passes on the corner, brushing close to me as she cuts a soft line above gray sidewalks and the heavy traffic from all of the faces chewing sandwiches that are just too busy to look up in wonder at visions of a cloud gliding as light as air, moving on the street, sailing beyond lunch. And the last one, a little heavier, is called Hunger. When I awoke from bathing in the sun, my watch was gone. I sat up and looked around, but those sly hands that moved like the wind, brushing gently past me, were miles from here. Now, this corner of a towel where I placed my watch was just a bright corner of a towel, glowing without shadow, and the wristwatch was at home on some wild set of bones. I will never know exactly how long the dark eyes scouted it, craving it like a delicious chocolate cake in a bakery window. But I do know that I can forgive any soul needier than mine. I gathered my belongings and left with sun-warmed sandals. Today I passed a fountain measuring sheets of tumbling joy. The cascading sounded a bit like seconds ticking on a watch. And I wondered if the person who moved just like the wind was hiding right behind the water, or was sitting on a bench, or was laughing out loud with a good friend, or was hungry. And that's it.
Thank you, David. Beautiful. Can really feel the space of all those poems. That was lovely. Right, and then we have June, and after that, Carly.
Hi, the first of the poems I want to read is one written relatively recently. I'm an older woman, and I think that explains it a little more. It's called Remembrance Day. The wounded soldiers are on parade, proud of the wheelchairs, the missing arms and legs. The crowds cheer the Invictus Games. The champions are applauded. The wounds are honourable, defending one's country, but killing the enemy. Women's wounds are not so honoured. They are hidden in the private places. They are despised as old maidish, the problems of the smelly aging of women. But they are not the wounds of killing, but the wounds of birthing, bringing life into the world, to replace the killings of the soldiers, continuing, not limiting the human race. Do they deserve ridicule or honour? So that was a cultural comment, but from my own experience. I've got one other medium and then a very short one. This one is a while ago, but it does look at, descent into areas, which I think is what we've been talking about. It's called It Does Not Take Much. It does not take much to sink a ship that is already foundering. What a galleon in full sail on a broad, calm ocean would have embraced and contained with some ease can be too much for a ship already in difficulties. A broken promise, an angry telephone call, a confidence betrayed, an unanswered email, and a changed timetable. These have caused me to jump ship and leap into the dark, uncharted waters. Better the devil you don't know. And the last one is very, very short. And again, it's it's a woman's version. It's very, very short. It's called High Heels. She was tottering unsteadily along the road, her 6-inch heels meeting with difficulty the potholes of ancestors' lives. Why do we allow them to put us on such tiny pedestals from which we can only fall?
Oh, thank you, June. So I just feel it weaving with everything that we heard earlier, all of those, just beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Right, and Carly.
Hi,
Welcome.
everyone. Thanks. I've never done this, so my heart is like racing right now. But I decided to actually pay attention to a dream I had a couple of years ago, in which my father, who passed away 20 years ago, made an appearance. and said, "Why don't you sing?" And I figured that reading a poem that you've written is somewhat akin to singing. So I'm going to do my best, but bear with me. The poem is called Into the Wild. Sometimes I search for tenderness in the place that longs for pain, a wound exalted, demanding gently that I feel the necessary rage to move through the quicksand. Sometimes the tenderness bites back, a frightened animal slick with desire to run back into the bush, wild in its cry for the ecosystem of a heart that paces out of tune the minute it is extracted from the larger landscape. I bear the wounds of that terrified single specimen that somehow got lost on its way to the river, following the scent of an expanding body of water large enough to contain an inner blooming. I hold the animal to my face. We sniff each other, gazing with fierce recognition, and catch ourselves recoiling with love in this mirror image of striking otherness. How do I bow to you, wild heart, when you hold me so tightly in your jaws? How can you guide me when there are no paths to follow except the sound of man-made instruments? Is there a place within your feral knowing for this human compass? Is there a clearing in the woods where our soul can come to rest?
Wonderful. I wouldn't have known it's your first time. It was just amazing.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for being with us. Great. I see Maura in the comments has a couple. Are you able to unmute?
Right,
There
I'm
we
trying
go.
to do both those things. Yeah, these are both about what's called in Wales Nos Galan Gaeaf, the feast of what they call Winter's Eve, when the fall is actually ending and the winter is starting. So the first one is October, and it's pretty firmly rooted right here in North Carolina, where I live. Our road has become a boneyard for children. Skulls, skeletons litter the verges, stick out of the red clay, or lie in untidy heaps. The road has become a funeral of all the ones we lost. R.I.P., dead or not, the coffins, the black plumes, the procession of ravens and pumpkin heads, a mask of children, and parents trailing their own famished ghosts and hobgoblins. Every year, the same tricks. Call, call. So that's the first one. And then this is another fairly short one, which I'm sort of imagining as being in the voice of my Welsh grandmother. On Winter's Eve, listen. Don't make light of it. Maybe there's truth in the rabbit's foot, spilled salt, crossed knives, and the devil his bite when you least expect it. Throw a pinch over your shoulder, clack the blades. The hounds and roan deer and black toads of Annwn, maybe you carried them with you. Maybe they were tiny to start with, like blight spores or viruses, like seeds stuck in boot cleats, pocket linings, and fluttered and burrowed and grew down stump holes, scrabbled down the duff, clay, sand and gravel horizons. They travel from a wilderness before wilderness and read the soil maps, the routeways in and out of dreams. Thank you.
Ooh, what was the
Thanks.
title of that again?
Sorry, David, what did you say?
What was the title?
The title, let me get the sound up. The title of the second one is On Winter's Eve, Listen.
Okay. I'm from Kentucky originally, so it sort of resonates. It almost has a little Gerard Manley Hopkins in it, in that you've got so much imagery in such a short space. So that's very nice.
Oh, thank you. He's one of my favorite poets, very much so. I didn't explain that Annwn is the Welsh term for the underworld, which is is rather special Celtic space. It's not similar to other worlds. Anyway, thank you for listening. This has been such fun.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Rula.
so fitting for our October session. It really, both of them
Yes,
felt like
I
the
hope so.
season that we're in and going into. So wonderful. Anyone else want to raise their hand, or just feel free to unmute if you have anything you want to share. As you can see, it's a very welcoming and amazingly talented group we have here tonight.
Sarah, are you going to read anything?
Oh, well, I am not a poet.
Oh,
I'm
You
more of a
are.
I'm more of a long form writer. I dabble in poetry here and there, but more long form. I
Can you
think
give us a dabble?
I haven't not so recent, but I do have a book out that came out at the beginning of the year. I could read a little piece of, I guess.
Yeah, please.
What to do? So my book is called Climate Change, Environments of Uncertainty and Loss, and it's part of the Jung Politics Culture series with Routledge. And I'm mostly an academic, but a very creative academic writer. So and a lot of rooting in dream work. So as I'll read this little piece that talks a little bit about dreams. So I am a long-time dream journal keeper. I have pages, journals, and digital notes on my phone full of dreams from over 3 years. Even though so much of this time, a very difficult time in my life, had me with uninterrupted sleep, I only remembered a few dreams. Nevertheless, the pieces and dreams I remembered at that time gave me a strange comfort. One of the dreams was that I was in a wood-paneled room, quite dark. It had the feeling of an underground storehouse, or something like a deckhand's quarters on an old pirate ship. As my eyes grew accustomed to the darkness, I noticed a table and a figure there. There was a young woman leaning against the table, wearing a loosely draped garment. It allowed her back to be fully exposed, and tattooed on her back was a map. The map seemed accurate, familiar, but it was also fantastic. There were monsters and mythical beasts, realms that were hidden or unknown, all depicted in the midst of the familiar continents and labels. When I woke, I wished I had the skill to draw what I had dreamt. It was fascinating and beautiful, but there was also an ominous feeling that lingered from that dark, lantern-lit space. This dream is one that taps on my shoulder from time to time. I'm still intrigued by those spaces on the map that are not on any map. Maps are a recurring theme for me. Not only treasure maps or GPS locations, but also maps like you'd see at a park or a camp. Those placards sitting at the beginning or split in a path. Maps are intriguing on so many levels. These maps in my dreams always point to literal locations, but there is a fantasy or a more figurative space just beyond the page. I think that's enough. A space for maps on our winding path today.
Yeah, that almost reads like a prose poem if you cut it in the right way, or you set it up like a block of text. It could read like a prose poem. That kind of reminds me of one I wrote, a haiku, and it's not on any map, the waterfall, not on any map, the tiny path we followed to the waterfall. It's interesting how poets can connect. When you hear one poem, it makes you sort of have a stream of consciousness where you connect. That's nice.
Yeah. And I hope Rula will read us some poetry.
Sarah, before I read anything, I want to comment on what David said. You are very poetic. So whatever Sarah writes is poetry. I know
Mm.
you say you're not a poet, but I think you are an amazing poet. And I highly recommend reading her book. It's very important for today. It's very important for tomorrow. And you will just love the way that Sarah writes. It's a beautiful, performative style of writing. So it's the perfect example of arts-based research. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing an excerpt from it. I do have a few new poems, actually. I've been writing poetry in the summer, surprisingly. And I recently opened a Substack page, and I made a note that after every Substack post, I will try to write a poem on the same topic so that I would approach it in two different ways. And it's been working so far. But the poem I'll be reading right now is actually, yeah, I have one from the Substack. So this is not from my most recent post, but it's from the one before it, and it's about Eros and the Numinous, the two different instincts, and why one of them always wants the other. And it's called One Flame, Many Forms. It's still a work in progress, so bear with me. Somewhere between halo and hip bone, a fire awaits, lit from both ends of the soul. Freud counted shadows in the body, but Jung listened to the hymns rising from the skin, the compass pointing to the unspeakable. We are wired to kiss mystery, to brush against God in the curl of a lip, to touch infinity in the tremor of an embrace. Rival lovers in secret corridors, each pull the other closer until the veil burns away. Perhaps this is Sophia's whisper. Wisdom is not cold light, but a presence breathing through the body. Perhaps this is Psyche's lesson, that love is soul learning to undress, calling prayer a pulse, one flame in many forms. So that is One Flame, Many Forms, and I have one called We Think of Time in Colors. And this was written when my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes almost a year and a half ago. And of course, that is a very dark time for any parent. And poetry helped me to assimilate and process and maybe even try to see a little bit of hope in the way. It's a very, for those of you who know about type 1 diabetes, it's very difficult to manage, especially in the early stages. There is so much that you need to change in your life, and there's so much that you need to learn about. But anyway, when life gives you lemons, you make poetry lemonade, or whatever works. I'm a rock in an ocean of whispers. I've developed an unusual intolerance to wrinkled fabric. In the beginning, I wondered, did I fail to fulfill the promised magic potion? Was my breast milk not talisman enough? But you squeeze poems from every drop of blood, seeds scattered from your fingertips, defiant in the face of anything that dared ask you to surrender. The world is an inflamed cervix, an orchid in that pocket of time, watching glucose bloom and wither. It's not liminal, nor valley deep, but depth can be measured in skies instead of valleys, in tree rings instead of scars. Tomorrow, I will suck up that dead spider with the vacuum, let it vibe with the compost of what might have been. We think of time in colors, the space in lip liner borders, insulin units in syringes, cherry blossoms raining their thresholds. We see the gloss, that egg-brushed sheen of blessings, and I realize how much you've bloomed. It burns the lips like good tea, steeped in sun and soil. Keep facing the sun, keep rooting toward the light. And that's it. Thank you for bearing with me.
Oh, that's a wonderful ending. Yeah. I have a question. You mentioned Adinu and Aminus. I'm not sure what that is, or what components those are? Am I maybe not pronouncing them correctly?
Oh, for the first poem, you mean?
Right. In the very first, you mentioned Arinu and Ominous?
Eros
Aranus.
and the numinous. Eros.
Eros.
Eros. Yeah, and the
Okay.
numinous.
Eros.
Sorry, I think
Eros.
the sound is coming through probably.
Yeah, Bella Reynolds
Yeah.
talks about Eros all the time. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Yes. And the new,
Thank you.
okay, yes, thank you so much.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. It's we are right at time, I think, but
Right on time.
wow, this has been amazing. What an incredible group.
This certainly has been wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing your poetic states of mind and poetic vibes to the table. This has been a wonderful evening for me, and I believe for everybody else. And thank you for making it happen. Thank you for the beautiful energy. And we will, of course, look for you next time. So hopefully, we will be announcing our next Creative session soon, within the next couple of weeks. And it should be sometime around late November. But we will be back with the details. So if you want, you could subscribe to our newsletter if you haven't yet. And then you'll be receiving all the updates. But thank you so much. And thank you, Sarah, for being the most gracious host and co-pilot as usual.
Thank
And
you.
looking forward to seeing everyone again.
Yes.
Yes.
And thank you,
Thank
Rula,
you.
Good night.
our intrepid
Yeah.
host always.